Clinton's alleged cover-up. We are joined tonight by his former press secretary, Dee Myers, joined again by Newsweek's chief political correspondent, Howard Fineman, and for a virtually unique historical perspective by our special guest tonight, the chief domestic advisor in Richard Nixon's White House, John Ehrlichman. Also tonight, the little matter of the football game Sunday here in San Diego, complete with a guided tour from the cultural icon of this city, the chicken.
How'd you get the gig?
Well, I was the only one who fit the costume.
Wait, it's a costume?
Also, we'll be joined by the color commentators for NBC's farewell Super Bowl, Phil Simms and Paul McGuire. But first, in full detail and full context, day 3 of the presidential crisis next on The Big Show. Hello, good evening, and welcome from San Diego, where the placid breezes 48 hours before football's Super Bowl game here are in stark contrast to the symbolic storm surrounding President William Jefferson Clinton, which continued to blow through the White House today with hurricane force. But there was silence at the eye of that hurricane, no further word from the president himself about the charges that he'd encouraged intern Monica Lewinsky to lie about their alleged affair. Tonight, Bill Clinton's former press secretary, Dee Myers, will join us in our quest to understand what's happening in the White House right now and what may happen there next. Also ahead, Howard Fineman of Newsweek, whose information and insight has proved so valuable to us on the first 2 nights of this crisis. And then later, a man who knew intimately many nights of crisis at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, Richard Nixon's chief domestic advisor, John Ehrlichman. First, the news of the day. NBC's David Bloom has confirmed that immunity negotiations between Lewinsky's attorneys and the independent counsel's office may resume this evening, but are more likely to resume tomorrow. And instead of hearing from the president, we heard from his surrogates, among them his personal lawyer, Robert Bennett.
The Paula Jones case is supposed to be a sexual harassment case. These witnesses who are being called have little to do with that case. This is about embarrassing the President of the United States of America.
Then, in a scene embarrassing, bizarre even for the always bizarre world of Washington, one made still more so by the context of these extraordinary last 3 days, the president dispatched 4 members of his cabinet into the outside world. Their mission, to assure the country that the White House and its chief resident were paying attention to things other than the scandal.
The president is focused on his job. He wants us to be focused on our jobs. And I personally can tell you, from having spent the last 72 hours talking and dealing on the Middle East, that the president is focused on doing his job. And I think the American public wants him to do his job. That's what they elected him to do. He is doing his job.
If the message about doing the job was not getting out that way, there was the more traditional route from the president's spokesman, Mike McCurry.
How much time the president has spent with his attorneys and staff members trying to walk through his relationship with Ms. Lewinsky and his recollections of her?
Today, so far as I know, not any. Maybe a very short period of time, but he's been doing some of the work related to the State of the Union I talked about, and then doing, obviously, the cabinet meeting we did. He had a short visit with the Thai finance minister earlier today, and I'm sure at some point this afternoon he's got to turn his attention to these matters at the proper point, but I think the lawyers are working to assemble whatever information they need for him to review.
So what really has been going on at the White House today, and how is the president dealing with this scandal that could still conceivably send him home to Little Rock in disgrace? For more, let's go to the White House. NBC News correspondent Claire Shipman joins us again. Claire, good evening.
Good evening.
Still all quiet on the Western Lawn? I mean, despite the announcement that the president is not expected to say anything until the State of the Union Tuesday, is there still internal debate over whether or not he may speak before then?
Much less today. I think what you've seen today is that the lawyers who are making the argument that he should sit tight, not say a word because he's in the middle of a criminal investigation and what he says could come back to hurt him, they've won their case. And so while I think a lot of the political staff may be disappointed that they can't see their boss get out there, answer some of the questions, take some of the air out of this, everybody seems to be on the same page at this point that it doesn't make a lot of sense right now.
Is there a guarantee in any sense that that page will continue to be the one that's being used, or is there still a chance before Tuesday that we'll hear from him?
Look, there's still a chance, and I think the one chance is if Monica Lewinsky and Starr and his people reach a deal, things start to snowball out of control, other details come out, then you might see the president forced into speaking. But right now they're saying it's unlikely he's going to speak before the State of the Union.
Claire, we're getting dribs and drabs, unsavory details on the tape coming out, things I guess nobody wants to know. The president supposedly sending Lewinsky a book, a dress, What are these little details having in terms of an effect on morale at the White House, to your knowledge?
Well, you know, I think a lot of the people here are anxious to believe the president's story, but the fact is almost nobody at the White House knows his story. There are only a handful of people who know, so I think they're clinging to the hope that there's some explanation, but behind the scenes I think people think something happened. A number of people have told me that. They don't know what it is, but they want him to explain it.
Last question, Claire. What is the presidential schedule this weekend, to your knowledge? Are there any public appearances at which we might inadvertently get a remark or a sense of his mood or anything like that?
He's supposed to be taking it very easy this weekend. We're going to hear from him in a radio address. He's going to stay home tomorrow night, watch a movie with friends, and then over the weekend on Sunday watch the Super Bowl, we're told. So I don't think so.
Claire Shipman on the White House lawn, thank you kindly again.
My pleasure.
As the president did not speak directly today, nor did his former intern Monica Lewinsky, nor has she yet publicly, but Lewinsky's lawyer William Ginsburg did with NBC's Tom Brokaw, and he expressed his displeasure that key evidence in her case had not been made available to him.
I find it fascinating and also very offensive to me that as Monica Lewinsky's attorney, I have not been privy to these tapes. I received snippets of transcripts from the OIC, and I have never heard a single one of these tapes in part or in whole.
Joining us now from Washington to give us his take on the story, Howard Fineman, chief political reporter for Newsweek. Howard, good evening. Thank you again for being with us.
Sure, Keith.
Now, a number of Newsweek staffers, we've discussed this the last two nights, have heard some of these tapes. What does Newsweek know that William Ginsburg does not know?
Well, apparently quite a bit. It's an odd situation where neither Monica Lewinsky's attorney nor really Bill Clinton's attorneys know what some of us in the press know, and of course what the special prosecutor knows, which is the contents of that perhaps 20, we don't know all of the tapes. There are about 20 hours worth of tapes at least. We've heard some of them. We have pieces of transcripts of some. But there's a whole lot of potential evidence there that none of the negotiators in what I think of as the Ken and Lewinsky show, the Monica show, know about. So they're sort of operating in the dark as well.
Where, to your knowledge, are speaking of the Ken and Monica show, these Lewinsky star negotiations? You heard what we were reporting from David Bloom at the White House, that the probability exists that tomorrow that impasse will be addressed again on the negotiations about immunity. What do you know of that story?
Well, what's going on here is that Ken Starr wants to do something more than go after the President of the United States on pure perjury charges. He's more interested in charges that relate back to the original mandate of his investigation. Obstruction of justice, for example, I think has a nicer ring for a special prosecutor than just perjury. So Monica Lewinsky provides the key, if she's telling, depending on what her story is, to going after this alleged conspiracy to obstruct justice, to suborn perjury, maybe even witness tampering. And what's happening is Ken Starr wants to get a stronger, more compelling, and perhaps more extensive story out of her than either she knows or at this point is willing to tell. And Ken Starr, I think, is playing hardball, saying, fine, you don't want to cooperate with us further? We're going to take you into the grand jury on Tuesday and indict you for perjury. We're not going to give you any kind of immunity at all. On the other side, Monica Lewinsky's attorney is saying, look, we have some things to tell, but we want a full grant of immunity. We don't want to be prosecuted. We don't want you to prosecute her for anything. And so neither side is yet willing to completely show its hand, apparently. And until they do, there will be no deal. And if there is no deal, as your reporters have been saying today, then Monica will go to the grand jury on Tuesday, and perhaps Vernon Jordan, the big-time lawyer who may or may not be involved in all this, will go also.
Is there a chance, Howard, that Vernon Jordan is being prepared as the sacrificial lamb in this? Is he like the John Mitchell of 1997?
No, I know Vernon Jordan pretty well, and he's certainly not a lamb. I don't know about sacrificial. What he was doing yesterday in that prepared statement that he gave was, first of all, showing that he's a tough guy. Number two, that he thinks he can tell the story straight. And number three, sending a message to Monica Lewinsky that if she changes her testimony from the affidavit that she signed, in other words, recants that affidavit, she's going to have credibility problems not only because of that switch, but because, according to Vernon Jordan, she told him that she had had no affair of any kind with the president.